Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Unnext News Radio podcast, your news source for all things unexplained. And now, here's your host for the Unnext News podcast, Margie K.
Hi, everyone. I'm here with Craig Campobasso, and he could not be with us live at the conference because he had a movie to do. So we'll have to excuse you for that. But thank you so much for being with us today, Craig.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. And you know how much I love you, Margie. I'd do anything for you. I wish I could be there on the day, but I got a nice directing job. So I'm going to be off doing that. So,
well, duty calls.
Yes.
And you are a super, super busy person. And I don't know how you have time to write all the books that you write.
I know.
But let's start off with, how did you get interested in this subject?
Well, when I was 26 years old, I had a major spiritual awakening. And during that awakening, I became more and more in tune with the universe, and I started connecting into consciousness and other consciousness. And this awakening was done through three, as I call them, universal master teachers that started coming to me in my dreams. And I literally, and you have to remember, I was a regular guy who had no clue what spirituality was, who had no clue what an extraterrestrial was. I didn't think about other worlds. I didn't think about that. I wasn't into sci-fi at the time, although I was working on the original television show, Amazing Stories, where we did have some of those wonderful kinds of episodes. And so I always say, my own amazing story began while I was working on Steven Spielberg's Amazing Stories. So I had this for several months. And I would be in the dream state, and I would just see these three beings vibrating love. I would wake up in the morning, I would remember it, and then as I started my day, I would forget it, and I'd remember it again the next morning and the next morning and the next morning. And these beings just felt so loving and everything. There was never any fear. And over a 6-month period, I began to realize that there was more going on, especially in the last 2 months, where I would wake up in my bedroom and I would see their astral forms at the foot of my bed. Again, I was experiencing no fear, only this immense love. And then the next step is that I went again into this other realm, astral traveling there. I knew my soul was somewhere different. It was a unique experience. And they fed me this golden light. And this light fed into my entire soul body and into all the cells in my body. I learned all of this, much, much later as I started going and digging deeper into the whole experience with their help as well. And so this was a beginning of my own cosmic awakening. I began meditations. I started meditating, and I was sort of on this mind internet across the universe, where I could therefore on any given day see a different species that would pop into the back into my mind. So you get a click at the back of your neck, it goes, and then boom, like I'm looking at you, I'm looking at them on the inside of my eyelids. Sometimes they would say something, sometimes they would not, but it was always this vibration of love. And then I started through another experience when they ignited my astral body one night. I started astral traveling to other worlds and learning about these worlds. So through a 2-year major awakening process with these master teachers, I wrote a whole book. And the book was based on my experiences, and I was hoping to have it published. There were a lot of these kind of spiritual books. It was in the time that Shirley was writing all of her, best-selling books, Shirley MacLaine. In fact, Shirley MacLaine read that book and gave me notes and pointers, and I was very grateful to her for that. And but I decided to take a trip to Mount Shasta and just treat myself, because I had accomplished finishing a book and had gone through this amazing journey for 2 years with these beings on an awakening process. And while I was there, I had a major experience with the great I Am. And I also learned that 2 of these beings were from the world of the great I Am, and they are actually in when we get there in the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac. Almost blanked on the own title of my own book. So they're called the Maramayams. They are a fascinating race, and people will love to read about them. So when I returned home, the main master teacher just came to me and said, "What would you say if I told you you wrote that book for yourself?" And I said, "Then I've learned a lot about myself." And he said, "Now it's time to write the books that you came here to write. I just want you to sit down, and I want you to keep writing and writing and writing until you cannot write anymore. I don't want you to edit. I don't want you to stop." And so they began waking me up at 3 a.m. every morning, and I would get up, and they explained to me that this was because the brain waves of everybody were sleeping, and it was easier for them to give me the information so that my mind could assimilate it quicker, because I was still at that point trying to raise my vibration to match theirs, because when at the time I had 3 portals in my actual apartment. I just had a 1-bedroom, had one at the bottom of my bed, one in the hallway, and one in the living room. So I didn't have an office, so I used to write at my kitchen table, and I could look directly out to where the portal was. So when I would sit down, I would see energies coming down, and they would come behind me. And literally for the first month, my body just rang with chills for like 15 minutes, because their energies were so high, but they were so beautiful. And I can't even describe it, because, you feel their energies, and you sob and you cry, because you can't believe how some person or these beings could be this beautiful on the inside. So I began to write. Of course, I didn't know what channeling was at that time. And that's basically what these books were channeled. And so the book is called, it's a series of books called The Autobiography of an Extraterrestrial Saga. The first book is called I Am Tehran. And Tehran is a 7'7" Pleiadian man who is in charge of the Starseed program into Earth. And he is a professor at the University of Melchizedek, which is located in the Mira system. It is 490 university planets. He is on University Planet 22 and 23. And he actually teaches star seeds that are coming in and raising consciousness, and what nationality they will be, what religion they will be, what to expect when they get here, how will this galactarian alignment be watching over them, all of these things that they need to know. And then he also instructs mighty messengers as well, because mighty messengers come into, like, we're just going to use Earth as an example, but they go, and this is how they raise consciousness on all planets throughout the universe, is that soul will have to have an incarnation of every race, creed of person on planet Earth, so that they know when they come in as a mighty messenger to teach the masses, that they will be understanding of walking in every person's shoes. Right. So it's really, yeah, it's so beautiful the way that they have this all orchestrated and everything. So that is how I got into writing this. I mean, the books go way deeper into the whole hierarchical part of the universe, all of these things that just started to become so fascinating for me. And yes, that's book 4 right there. It's a 4-part book series. It'll be 7 in total in the end. And the website's autobiography of anet.com, if people want to get autographed copies. You can buy all 4 books too with one click. So it's learning about Tehran, but the one thing that's most interesting about Tehran is that he is a here we go. This is what Tehran looks like, so everybody can kind of get an idea. There we go. A little card, right? Typical Pleiadian look. And he was picked to do this job for one reason, is that he was born dualistic in a society that is fully conscious. And there is an anomaly of around every 200,000 births in their realm of fully conscious beings, there will be a dualistic being born. And this is so that the fully conscious beings will remain understanding of how a dualistic being works and vice versa, right? And some of them are more rebellious than others, and some learn a lot. But Tehran goes on the journey of being this dualistic person because he is able to teach the star seeds, this is what you're going to experience when you're dualistic.
So what do you mean by dualistic?
Dualistic meaning that we here still have a choice. We can do we can create good, or we can create evil and chaos in our lives. This duality. So in other words, up there, the heart rules the mind, right? Here, the ego rules us, right? The ego does not rule them. They, even though they're fully conscious, still have emotions, still have everything that we go through, but they know how to deal with it. So if there is any friction or anything that goes on, they wait a span of time when they both feel it's right, and they discuss it, and they have things. It doesn't mean that the hurt goes away, but the talking of it through is a really awesome thing. They also have a thing called an imager. This is mind-blowing technology, but for them, if they want to use this imager, it's like taking a hologram of themselves and using it as a mirror. Like some women use it for makeup, some men use it, they adjust their clothes. But if they want, they can transfer their consciousness into their own imager, and they can have a conversation with the depth of their soul on issues they're trying to work through, and the soul will speak the truth to them no matter how hard it might hit them. So you have to be willing to really come up and realize the things that are going on in your own life. A lot of times we all push it down. Doesn't mean that they don't do that as well. They do work through everything, but sometimes issues can be put down. and things do need to get worked through. So it's all very fascinating.
Wow, that is fascinating. That'd be a handy tool to have.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, so that brings me to you want to talk about the ET Almanac now?
Absolutely. That's what we're here for. Yes.
All right. So my book agent called me in early 2019, and he said, "I've got a great idea for a book, and I know you're the man to write it." And I said, "Oh," and he goes, "And I even have the title." He said, "The Extraterrestrial Species Almanac." And I went, "Oh my God, I could totally write that book." So, and of course, because of all of my prior experience of everything that I went through with the writing of the autobiography of an extraterrestrial books and the Universal Teachers and making that connection, but also because I've from the time I was 26 all the way till now, I have studied ufology. I have studied and read all of the contactee books, all of the abduction books. I've met with lots of people who have been abducted, some who, a lot of women who are impregnated and the babies took, not just grays and reptiles, but also human babies that were implanted inside of human women as well. So, so anyway, are you hearing all this background noise at all?
No, don't hear it.
I am. It's like I'm on a frequency. All right, I think that just kind of went away. Here we go. So I said, he said, "All right, just drop a proposal," and he said, "I can sell it." So I did, and he sold it 4 days later, right? Literally 4 days later. I said, this doesn't happen
No,
ever,
no.
right? And I had to sit back and take a look at this, and I said, well, maybe the universe wants this out because something's going to happen. Well, what's today, Margie?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Today, the government releases all the new documents on extraterrestrials and craft and all of that kind of thing. So we know that the government has been leading up to bringing these things out more and more and more, and we're going to see a lot more of that as well. And I think it's really good. If I was a person who was not schooled in this type of thing, I would love to have a book to go to see what races have been visiting Earth, right?
Sure.
So that was fascinating. So then I had to decide, okay, well, I had to bring the book in under 300 pages. And I was trying to figure out how many races I could fit in there, because all the publisher wanted was a thumbnail review. And they said if people wanted to know more, they could go to the internet, right? So I said, okay. So I created a thing in the back of the book that is a terminology of the extraterrestrial world, so it wouldn't be repeated over and over again. I also put in about how this galactarian alignment of space peoples and planets, how what their motherships are, starships, plasma ships, scout ships, regular ships as well, to give everybody an idea, because in their realm, they share all technology. So it's all based on the same technology, although the models might look different, right?
Okay.
So, yeah. And of course, they have time travel and all of those different types of things with their technology, this very advanced technology. So anyway, I was listening to Paul Hellyer do a talk, and he said that he knew of 82 races visiting Earth. And I am a big fan of Mr. Hellyer's. And I said, I'm going to try and squeeze 82 races into this book and in honor of him. And I did it. I did it. And so that's why there's 82 races. There are a whole lot more races, but these were the ones that were approved and also got into the book. So my next step was, all right, now what I did was I went to a lot of the contactees, like the Clarion information. I went to Maurizio Cavallo, who has a book called Beyond the Heavens, and he is in physical contact with the human Clarions. He even allowed me to put 2 of the many pictures he has in the book of the Clarion beings. And so and there are many Clarions, because they look so much like us, living on the planet and integrating and working, because they also believe, by them being here on the planet, because their energy will elevate all those around them on a quicker timeline as well. And they're also here to help. For other human races as well, Ricardo Gonzalez has he's been in contact with the Apunians for countless years. And one of the male being that he's in contact with, I believe, is 10 feet tall. And they do come to him, and they appear in what we call a Zendra. They call it a Zendra. It's a portal. So if he's on the ship, and once there was a large group that went with him to Mount Shasta, maybe 5 years ago, I believe. One of my dear friends was there and experienced this. Is that there was a group of maybe, I don't know, 100 people, somewhere like that. They meditated, they chanted. They were out at Sand Flats, which is a big open thing, and then there's forest. And so as it started to become dusk, one of the ships came over, and everyone got to witness the ship that was there. And then there were 6 people selected to go and meet this being named Antaral, and they went into the forest. Everyone else was told to go back to base camp. My friend was not picked, but he stayed only about 100 feet away in the meadow to observe from afar. And he said when the portal opened up, the entire forest lit up. All the trees at the top were all this beautiful blue. And then it was about 20 minutes. And when everyone came out, they were in this blissful catatonic state. And they were talking about seeing him. There were other beings as well. They were not allowed to touch him or go into the Zendra, but I have also seen other people that Antaral has met with, also of Latin descent, is that they were able to walk into the portal, and then they were actually on the ship, literally like that. It's like one world meets another right there. So wow. That is a really, really fascinating race. And then a lot of the other races, I did the similar thing, but I went to Wendell Stevens' collection. Wendell Stevens made over 65 books of contactee cases in his lifetime. And people can go there. The only place they can really get them, if they want to get them, is in a PDF format. It's UFOphotoarchives.com. His daughter, Cece, runs it. You can even buy all of them for, like, I think a little over $100, something like that. So Cece allowed me to pick and choose the books that I wanted to do. And some of my favorites were like the Regalians, which was sort of this hybridy looking between a human and a lizard man, right? And they had brought on board a 14-year-old Cherokee girl. And this Cherokee girl had no fear. And all they wanted to do was share with her who they were. And because they talked in clicks and noises and things like that, he hooked her up to a telepathy device that would then allow him and her, because he wore one too, to have a conversation. And he gave her a tour of the ship, told them who they were, and just wanted people to know about them, and that, you know, that they were good people, but they know that they couldn't really come down here and shake anyone's hand because we would be terrified of that. Now, because she was hooked up to this transmitter, she was able to remember every detail because they could not mind swipe her.
Wow.
Right. So that was really fascinating. And I had an artist do an amazing rendition of him. I'm going to just see as I'm talking if I can find it. I'll hold it up a little bit for people to see. By the way, I am making this into a documentary as we speak. So it's going to be an extension of the book with a lot more information about all of this.
Awesome.
All of this information as well. So, and we've just finished. We've only got a couple more interviews to do, and we're bringing all the extraterrestrials to life through CGI. Right?
Oh, fantastic.
Me being in the movies, we can do that.
Sure.
Right? So
you have the resources.
I have the resources. Yeah. Oh, here we go. And that little necklace that he's wearing, that is a key. And when he touches it to a wall, the wall opens up and they go into the next section of the ship. So those were great. Now I know you had some pictures. You wanna flip some up and we'll try and go through them.
Thing.
All right. So
this is Arcturian.
Those are the Arcturians. Now I'm very good friends with a woman who is actually an Arcturian hybrid. And so I talked to her about the Arcturians, but we know that they're extremely evolved and advanced. And hang on, there we go. And some of them have blue skin. They all are different shapes and sizes, just like us, depending on the offshoot of the race. They are the really intelligent, extremely spiritual races are the Arcturians, the Andromedans, the Pleiadians, and the Sirians. Lyrans as well. And a lot of the other races will go to them for advice and for counsel. All of the different worlds also have a created being that is assigned to their world, like Valiant Thor is assigned to Earth, and he is a part of being here to see the world move through its transformation of going from dualistic into becoming fully conscious beings and then reintegrating with universal society. And I do have a section in here on created beings. So if people want to learn more about who and what a created being is, they can look there. Do you want to put up the Andromedans? Yeah, there we go. All right, so Andromedans, they're various shades of blue. It's a very interesting, I have a friend who actually is an Andromedan contactee and was taken on their craft and was shown many, many things. And they have three classifications. There's male, female, and then they have an androgynous class. which is either or. Now, the only thing that I don't know is if the androgynous class is hermaphrodite or not. You know, a lot of races are hermaphrodite up there because they don't have the separation of male and female, even though we here have the separation of the male and female in bodily form. We still have feminine qualities in masculine as well, because we were bred from a man and a woman. And a lot of us know when we're down here, we're either working on our masculine or feminine qualities because we're trying to blend them so that they will balance. Right. So that's cool. All right. What do you got next? Those are the Zeta humans. They're actually really beautiful. They're also from Zeta Reticuli. They have wow, they're like these super computer beings that have a lot of they can do a lot of processing in their minds as well. But this race kept their spirituality, where a lot of the other gray races, they don't like to be called or lopped into grays necessarily. That's why they like to be called Zeta humans. So they've been visiting Earth for quite a long time. There's many offshoots of these types of really, really good beings and good races too. I couldn't include all the different offshoots and the names, but a lot of people know who they are. A lot of people have written me and said, oh, I've seen this race or I've seen that race. And have you heard of this one? And this one came to me. I mean, one person asked me if I had ever seen a peppered Pleiadian. And I said, no. And I guess there are Pleiadians that have a peppered looking skin. I know for a fact, Dr. Frank Strange has told me when he visited the starship many times, that's where he would see all the different beings from across the universe. He explained, he said, you know, Craig, I once saw a being who had zebra skin. And I always thought that was fascinating. And I never mentioned it to anybody because, you know, that's a little off, right? You know, because that kind of thing. And then I was doing a radio show with my friend Tom Dongo. And Tom said, you know, Linda Mooten-Howe was telling me that she met a contactee and they were meeting with these beings who had zebra skin. And I was like, well, there you go. Right now, I don't know what the race is called or anything like that. But if I ever do another book, I would really try and find out and, you know, put them in for inclusion into the book as well. But one of the most fascinating things, Margie, during this whole process is when I was writing the book in 2019, I was contacted by a woman in Canada. And she said, I'm your fourth or fifth cousin on your mother's father's side, and I'm looking for information. And I said, sure, I'll give you whatever I want, because I love genealogy. I've done a lot of it in my family with my mom's two sisters. And so I said to her, I found out when I was 12, my mother told me that my father was my stepfather, and that she had married him when I was 1 year old, and that I have a biological father. And all I know is his name. I don't have a picture of him or anything like that. And she goes, oh, I can find him. So I gave her the name and whatever information I had. Many months later, she emailed me and said, well, I found him. He passed away in 2006. This is where he's buried. Now he's buried at Forest Lawn, across from Warner Brothers in Burbank. So I drove down there the following morning, went to the front desk, asked them if they had a name of anybody who called when he had passed away. And they looked and they go, yeah, we actually do. And they didn't have a contact number, but they gave me the gentleman's name. So I got the name. I went and visited my father's crypt, and past Betty Davis, Liberace along the way, and and just go, wow, this really is a Warner Brothers cemetery. And so when I got home, I looked the guy up online. I got an address. He lived around the corner from me. Said he was 74 years old then. I wrote him a letter, and I put my picture in there, and I said, if you know anybody in Fred's family, would you please pass this letter along? Because he had a different last name. And 2 days later, I got a phone call from his son. And his son said, my dad got your letter. And I said, oh, was your dad friends with Fred? And he said, no, it's actually his half brother. And I said, oh, so you must be my cousin. And he goes, yeah, I guess I am. And he said, normally one would probably ignore a letter like this, but you look exactly like Fred. And I said, well, I don't know, because I've never seen a picture of Fred. I saw one when I was young that my mom had, but it vanished over the years, and I don't have recollection of it. So anyway, I made a dinner date with my new uncle and cousin, and it was 3 long, glorious hours of them just filling me in on Fred's life. And about an hour into the conference, into the meal, my Uncle John looked at me, and he just kept staring at me. He goes, this is just so weird. You look just like him. He goes, you're even the same height he was. He goes, I'm so happy, because we have a part of him here. And then he said, your father was in Project Blue Book. And I went, what?
Of course he was.
like right out of nowhere, your father was in Project Blue Book. And I said, do you know what that is? And he goes, I kind of do, but not really. And then my cousin stepped in and said, yeah, me and my brother, my uncle has 3 sons. Me and my one brother, we were on him all the time to give us any information, and he wouldn't talk. He knew how to keep a secret. I said, well, evidently, because he never told you about me, right? And, they got a chuckle out of that. So here, I just find it interesting that, Project Blue Book actually was the Air Force's study on UFOs that started in 1952, was decommissioned in 1970. They investigated over 11,000 sightings, and its main study was to determine if UFOs were a threat to national security and to scientifically analyze UFO-related data. And I started thinking to myself, okay, well, I'm just wrote a MUFON book. I'm writing a MUFON book, which is the US-based nonprofit of civilian volunteers who study reported UFO sightings, right? So I'm like, okay, well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And then my uncle said, well, he when he left the Air Force, by the way, he was there when Valiant Thor was there.
Oh.
And it makes me wonder if he ever saw him, met him, typed up the report on him, because my uncle said, I don't know what he did, but my guess is he was an extremely fast typist. He may have typed up some of those Project Blue Book reports. He said, but I don't know. And it's just because everything is just so intertwined, right? Like this is mind-blowing in itself, but that component could very well be true, right? I'll never know unless somebody from the government says, yes, it was. They'd come forward and give me a file or something.
Well, who knows? Maybe some of this stuff being released now will have that in there.
Yeah, that would be great. So he came back, and then my uncle said he joined IATSE, Teamsters, and he became the head construction at Warner Brothers and built sets and for their movies and TV shows. And when I was at Universal, he was at Warner Brothers, and we were at 2 different studios back to back and didn't even know it.
Wow.
And he lived where I live. He lived always very near me. I could have been in the same places that he was as well. So we were both in the film business. We were both into this kind of material, right? And, and both very creative. So I just thought that was mind-blowing. I mean, that was cool, right?
This is definitely a case for DNA.
Yes.
Because obviously you never knew each other, and
right.
you're doing such similar things.
But
I have to say, let's go back to Valiant Thor for a minute.
Sure.
If you don't mind.
Yeah.
There's got to be a connection between your father and Valiant Thor and you and Valiant Thor. And you and I connected because I sought you out because I have a connection with Valiant Thor, and I was looking for other people who had been contacted by him. Of course, my contact out and overt contact was in 1985, but then I found out later that he's really been with me my entire life.
Yes.
So how did you find out about Valiant Thor, and how did you meet Dr. Stranges?
Well, it's a really interesting story. The place that I'm living in now, I moved in maybe a month before 9/11, right? And I had set up my couches, and because of all the previous stories I've told you about my connection with these master teachers and these beings, I can see energy and form. Right. And sometimes if they want to show themselves in an astral form, I can see that as well. But I can see energies in my house, and I can decipher who it is. Right. Because I see the form and I know the energy signature. That's how they do it there. So every time now, you have to remember, I hadn't read Stranger at the Pentagon since maybe the late 80s, that kind of thing. I think, what did I move in here, like 1990 or something like that? Was that when 9/11 was? Was it 90 or 2000? No, 2001, I think, right? Yeah. And so every time I would walk by my couch and my love seat, I would see Valiant Thor and his vice commander sitting there in an energetic form every day, all day long, for a couple of months. And I kept saying, I wonder why they're there, but I would never receive an answer, right? And then at the time, I had a casting partner. Her name was Joy Todd. She cast all of Sidney Lumet's movies and Once Upon a Time in America. Very well-known CD from New York, and she had moved out here, and I just loved and adored her. And she said, I have 2 friends, an elderly couple that have been married forever, and you have to meet them. They're coming out here, and they see UFOs in Arizona where they live all the time. And they have lots of stories. I would love for you to meet them. So they came to the office, and I was talking to the wife, and literally the first words out of her mouth were, "Well, Craig, you know our friend Dr. Frank." And I said, "Do you mean strangers?" And she says, "Why, yes, you want to meet him?" She was so sweet. She was like this little sweet Southern lady. I just loved her. And I said, "Yes, I do." I literally the following week was sitting with Dr. Frank at lunch, me being the fan, and his secretary was there as well. And we just had this long lunch. I thought that was going to be it. And so we said our goodbyes, we exchanged numbers. And then all of a sudden he just called me, and we just kept talking and talking and talking. And for about the 8 years or 7 years that we were together, he sort of became like a surrogate father, a surrogate brother to me. And we talked almost every day. We saw each other at least once or twice a week for lunch. And I would travel with him. A lot of people don't know he was a U.S. Marshal. He could carry a gun. So when we were on airplanes, they brought us on way ahead of time and all of that kind of stuff. He was such an amazing man. And at a certain point, he just called me and said, Craig, I've had so many stops and starts with making this into a movie and so many disappointments. And somebody has just called and wants to make it into a movie, and you're in the business and I don't know anything about it. Would you come to the meeting? And I said, sure. So I went with him and his wife. And the gentleman that wanted to make a movie had never made a movie before and didn't have any credits. And when I asked him for his resume on the phone later, he said, I don't do business that way. I only do it on a handshake. And I said, well, then you're not going to be doing business with Dr. Frank. So because I was very overprotective of him. And, I explained to Dr. Frank, I said, your book is vignettes of stories, and it's not a full fleshed out story. So, so anyway, over a course of time, I began to write questions out. And what I did is I would just go to his house several times a week and just interview him for hours and learn about all of the backstories and all the stories that the public never heard of, and really about who Valiant Thor was, who all the vice commanders were, who Yanaya, who is also from Melchizedek, a created being, part of Valiant Thor's craft, and Yo, who is his associate, and who they were, and how all of the different things in the ships, what's the rotation of the crews and how all of that is set up. So anyway, so I got all of that together, and on the first day that I started writing the script, Valiant Thor came to me in a dream, and I was very excited because I finally got to hear his voice. The voice that Dr. Frank had explained to me was this cross between gentleness and strength. And he showed me the road of the film. And then that was that. And then on the final day of finishing up the script, I called Dr. Frank at home because I knew he was there, not at the office. And I said, look, I just have a couple more questions. And we always had a joking thing because I was literally calling him like 20 times a day with questions as I was writing the script. And he had his voice on when somebody else is in the other room, in the same room. He would say, okay, uh-huh. And then all of a sudden he started laughing. And they were questions for Valiant Thor. And he said, well, actually, he's sitting right here. And so I could hear him giving the answers in the background, right?
Wow.
And I wrote them down. Never thought to say, put them on the phone. And then when I was done, I said, okay, well, thank you so much. And I hung up. I didn't think about anything. It was just like a phone call. And then later I was like, okay, wait a minute. Did I just get swiped? But it was very interesting, to say the least, in that respect. And a lot of people want proof, and a lot of people want all of this. I can say, look, I can share these stories with you. It's up to you whether you want to believe them or not. But I think my most profound story, I have never met them in person. I meet them on the inner, right? Through telepathy, or they will, when I'm writing, they share their feeling body with me. So they sit inside me so I can write from who they are. And again, you weep and you cry for quite some time. And if Valiant Thor does it, it's about a 15-minute sob because that is so beautiful on the inside. But it's, and then when you're done, then they leave, and it's not any kind of weird form of possession or anything. It's a sharing thing. It's similar to telepathy. It's almost identical to telepathy. So if we are both fully created beings, and we are having telepathic thought, that as I'm doing this, I am sharing with you my feeling body in your feeling body, and you're sharing your reactions in my feeling body. So as I gained experience from it, I'm gaining more experience by seeing your reactions to it and feeling it inside my soul. It's a whole different thing. It's like when you die and you get a soul review, but you're alive, right? It's that type of thing. So that's what telepathy is. So it was that form of it. But I would say the one thing that really, in the early 90s, as I was explaining to you before, when they would come around in the Mind internet, I saw a human woman, beautiful with porcelain white skin, green eyes, red shoulder length hair, in a powder blue uniform, standing in front of a silver saucer. And she was just beaming light from one ear to the other. And I kept saying, I just would love to know who that was. I had no idea for years and years and years, right? And then when I met Dr. Frank, and he started going back and forth with the questions when he would visit them on the ship in Las Vegas, which is stationed at Lake Mead, he came back once and he said, oh, Teal said to say hello to you, right? And of course, the woman in the red hair popped in my mind. But as I was writing all the questions, she was back in my mind talking.
Ah.
So I was like, okay, well, who is this? Who is this? And I said, who's Teal? And he said, she's one of Valiant Thor's vice commanders. And I said, does she have red hair and green eyes? And he looked at me so strangely because I described her to a T. She's very Rubenesque, right? And in that powder blue uniform, it was, it was very beautiful and revealing. But they're also, they think everything is beautiful. Everybody is beautiful. Everything is beautiful. But she was so beautiful, and so I said, oh, well, so I made that connection. And then from then on, she sort of was the main one that got me through all of the writing process, although some of the others stepped in. Valiant Thor would come in every once in a while and check on things. And, I would just feel him around and say, okay, blah, blah, blah. And then he might give a note or something. A lot of it was through downloads at night as well. Because after I wrote the first script, I gave it to Dr. Frank, and he said, Val held it and just said, tell him good job. He said he absorbs things, he doesn't read them. And then he said, I said, really, no notes? And he said, nope. And then that night, when I woke up the next morning, all the notes were swimming around in my head like the rings of Saturn. And I had to get to the computer to get them all out, right? So, but as it progressed, I was able to hear notes and things like that directly. But one more quick story about Teal is, I don't know if it was around 2004, 5, or 6. I got really, really sick. I had a very bad stomach ache. I was bedridden for 3 days. I had to call a friend and say, you've got to take me to the doctor because I can't even walk or drive. And they did. They tried giving me things for my stomach. Nothing worked. And so they put me in an ambulance, rushed me to the hospital. And it was decided that I had a bowel obstruction. They did x-rays, and they were going to operate on me in the morning. So from the time they brought my friend, she brought me in, around noon until 11 o'clock at night when she left and I went to sleep. Nobody knew about it because it was just her and I. And in the middle of the night, I woke up in twilight. And I felt Teal standing over me, and I felt bubbles, little tiny bubbles going through all my intestines. It was a strange but really amazing feeling. And I knew when I woke up in the morning, I was going to be all right. So I wake up in the morning and I glance over to the side of my bed, and who is sitting there but Dr. Frank Stranges.
Mm-hmm.
And he always had this bright smile, and he said, "Hey, Teal called me and woke me up early this morning. She said to get down here and to tell you she fixed you up last night." And I said, "I know she did." So I actually told them I was feeling better. They redid the x-rays, and I left the hospital that day and didn't have to have an operation, thank God.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's just amazing.
Yeah, amazing stories. So, there are lots of healing stories. Valiant Thor healed a man who had a bleeding ulcer, who was an airman, right? And they had grounded him. They wouldn't let him fly, and Valiant Thor just didn't know him, stopped him in the hallway one day, talked to him, put his hands, here and here like this. And the man just walked away, and with this feeling, he felt all these tingles, and he was cured and was reinstated. And Dr. Frank said, Val told me that story. And he said many, many years later, sometime in the 80s, because this was in probably somewhere between 57 and 59 that happened. Dr. Frank said that man and his wife came to one of his lectures, and Dr. Frank would tell that story, and he came up to him afterwards and said, "I'm that man."
Amazing.
Yeah.
Didn't Valiant Thor also save Doctor Strange's at least once?
Several times, actually. There were it was either Valiant Thor or Dawn and Thawne, which are two of the vice commanders. So the vice commanders are Dawn, Thawne, Thonn, Teal, and Zan, Zann. And then there is Unaya, who is also a Melchizedek created being, who is a part of the crew, and also his associate, whose name is Yo. I never learned the correct pronunciation because I heard Dr. Frank say it different ways, and I'm not sure, how to say it. So anyway, but yes, Dr. Frank at one point was saved by Dawn and Thawne, and another time after he had been married, he was run off the road, and he was paralyzed from the waist down. And the doctor said he wasn't going to make it. And Val walked into the hospital and laid hands on him. And Dr. Frank walked out that afternoon. He said, when I walked out the front door, the paramedics were bringing somebody else in, the ones that brought me in. And he said, you should have seen their faces. They were just stunned.
I would imagine.
Yeah. I mean, there were several things when he was in Mainz, Germany, when he was on the same stage as like Werner von Braun and a lot of the big people as well. Two guys, they got him away from his food, which was soup, saying that there was a phone call and they were under the guise that they were reporters and wanted to interview him. And while he went away to take this phone call, they poured crushed glass into his soup, upon which he ate. And so Valiant Thor, and there's a story of another gentleman who was there who was told to mix this elixir before he came, and he didn't know why. And it was those two things that, helped him to overcome that as well. So
Just for everybody who, or people who are watching that don't know the background of Valiant Thor, could you kind of give us an overview of who he is and where he's from?
Sure. Well, the main perception is that he's from Venus, but my perception in learning all of this is, I think, as with all created beings, they are part of the entire universe, and then at certain points they are given sectors to look over. So I don't think that he is actually from Venus. My intuition says more of like the general Pleiades area, that type of thing. But you can't quote me on that. That's only my own intuition in doing all this work over the years with them. But they live on Venus and the other planets throughout our solar system. All the beings live on the interior of the planets. They can terrace them out to look to be floors. They have technology where they have things called synchrotron skies. So if they're outdoor floors, when you look up into the sky, it's like looking up into the sky if you were on Earth. Or if they want that sky to be green like their home world, they can do that as well. And because all the different planets have different sky colors because of the suns and the atmospheric things. And but he was given the task of coming here many years before he arrived, and I believe he did probably at that point go and move into the interior of Venus, and he had visited the Earth on many occasions and was learning as much as he could about it. And then Dr. Frank said that he really could not wait to start his mission, which started on March 16th, 1957, which was a pre-arranged landing. And he was brought to the Pentagon, debriefed there, brought on the underground train to the White House, where he met with Eisenhower, Nixon, who was the vice president, Joint Chiefs, and other officials as well. There was a brief meeting there. He came with a divine design that was to help eliminate poverty, sickness, any kind of disease, how to prolong life. He also came with the tools to share with our government about how we're polluting the planet, and about the atomics that they've been doing, and that how that not only offsets the balance of this planet, but interdimensional planets and planets throughout the solar system, even if it's by a smidgen. So over these 3 years, he would be discussing all of these on top of many other things. Dr. Frank said that he did go and help them in the very beginnings of NASA, because NASA was getting up on its legs at that time, and was helping them do certain things there. He would not, just so everybody knows, he would not give them his technology. That was, his technology was organic technology, is self-thinking technology. We might call it AI, but it's AI that is only his personal AI, meaning his DNA is built into the ship. So he's the only one that can fly it. Right? He can jump it across the universe. He can jump it into other universes, into other super universes with the correct coordinates in his mind and with permission as well. So if somebody decided to go get into his craft and go for a joyride, there is no way that that's going to ever happen. Right? They might be able to maneuver it on the ground or move it around or that kind of thing. But those crafts, when they're hovering in the air, you could just take your finger and go like that and push it. That's how the gravity and the light that's around it, it makes it light as a feather. Okay. So yeah, so there we go. That's Valiant Thor. That was taken by August Roberts, who was a retired Air Force photographer and an amateur ufologist. That was taken in 1958 at Howard Menger's house. Howard and his wife, Rose. Howard was a major contactee with human beings from across the universe and or across our solar system for sure. And so when he would have UFO get-togethers or things like that, how he was able to tell them apart was there was a secret handshake that he was told that he would be given. And if he got that handshake, he would know that it was a visitor. So it was confirmed that in August Roberts' artifacts and the things that he left behind, that he did speak to Howard that night and confirmed that Don and Jill and Val, the secret handshake was given, and that he knew that they were not from here. So August took those pictures. He developed those pictures. He was good friends with Dr. Frank, and this is where a lot of people don't know where the story goes, and this is great that I'm able to share this with people. Is then Dr. Frank was living in New Jersey. Tons of extraterrestrials in New Jersey in the late 50s. I'm just going to tell you. Lots and lots of ETs, human ones in New Jersey, and Highbridge as well. So the next day he calls Dr. Frank and he says, "Oh my God, I got to tell you about, this extraterrestrial that was at, Howard's house, and I got pictures." And he says, "Well, come over." He tells Dr. Frank all about, this man and that Howard confirmed it. And he also explained to him that when he viewed Valiant Thor's hand and fingerprints, that he had none. It was bald as a peeled boiled egg, as Dr. Frank would always describe it. So, and that was because he was not marked. All of us are marked. He is not marked because he is a part of that, he's part of the angelic realm, is really the easiest way for people to understand it without going into greater detail. So Dr. Frank would therefore, he blew up the picture of Valiant Thor, and he used to speak on UFOs and the Bible. And he was invited to go to a church in Washington, D.C. in December of 1959, 2 months before I was born, right? Mm-hmm. And while he is there in Washington, D.C., he is speaking every single night for 2 weeks on a different subject. So the night that he is speaking on UFOs and the Bible, he would talk about the things in Ezekiel. He would talk about all the things in the Bible that correlated to extraterrestrials. And then he would talk about the Adamski case, and he would have the photographs of what Adamski had photographed, photographs of what Howard Menger had photographed, and they were like identical ships of the old sort of flying saucers of yesteryear with the 3 big balls on the bottom, right? Mm-hmm. The rotating balls. And then he would just have this lone picture of Valiant Thor in the middle of the board of all of this stuff. And there were other UFO photos from around the world that August had given him. I have all those photos now, all the big ones, the original ones, which we will use in the movie and when we do the big feature film. Still looking for financing, everybody. So call me.
Send your money to Craig.
Yeah, but we need like $30 million. So we need an angel investor to get us there, and we have everything ready to go. Where was I? What was I saying?
Boy, I'm drawing a blank.
I know, I drew a blank. So we were just so he's there. So he's there in Washington, D.C. He tells the story that August told about Valiant Thor, right? And then there was an African American high-level secretary, because her father also worked there and was really loved, so they had moved her up, and she was extremely spiritual, and she belonged to that church. And on this particular night, she went up to Dr. Frank and pointed to Valiant's picture, and she showed him her Pentagon badge. And she said, "Is there somewhere private we can talk?" And they went into the back, into the pastor's room. And she had pointed to Valiant Thor before, and she said, "He wants to meet with you." And Dr. Frank said, "You have my undivided attention." And so, long story short, she picked him up the next morning, I think at 8 a.m., brought him to the Pentagon. He got through both checkpoints because he would just do, he was terrified. And she had a badge, he didn't. And she said, "Just do as I do." And, she would do that. He would do that. And he would just go right on through. Right. So he had to get through 2 checkpoints. And then he said, and she dropped him off at an unmarked door. And she said, "He's in there." And she started to walk away. And he said, I got a little frightened. I said, "Hey, wait a minute. How am I going to get out of here?" And she says, "Same way you came in." So,
wow.
Right. So he went into the room. As he opens the door like this, and he sees, military guys working on typewriters, filing, doing stuff in the room. He clears his throat, says, "Excuse me." None of them pay him any mind. As the door shut, a man who was sitting behind the door stands up and says, "Hello, Frank," and shook his hand. And then they had a short conversation. He told Dr. Frank only things that his parents would know that would help him to believe that he was who he was. Although he said, "You knew it when you saw him, because when you looked into his eyes, he could see right through you and read your soul." Even August Roberts said that, right? And they, like August said, it was frightening and exhilarating at the same time. For you and I, it'd be exhilarating, right? So, and Dr. Frank used to say, yeah, it makes you feel infinitesimal and gigantic at the same time. And so they talked, and he lit him. He brought his suit, although he was in his regular, Earth suit. And he let him hold his suit, and he told him all the tests they were doing on it, and that it was impenetrable, and all of that, and that the government couldn't figure it out, and little things like that. And then he said, I'll see you again. And Dr. Frank was very happy about that, because he really wanted to see him again, because he had told him he was leaving the following March 16th in 1960. So he did return exactly again on March 16th, 1961, and remade contact at some point after with Dr. Frank. Dr. Frank put out a little small book called My Friend from Beyond Earth, talking about him. And then he wrote Stranger at the Pentagon, which was released in 1967. And then throughout the years, he did updated versions of the book more and more. as time went. So I think there's like 3 versions of the book. The last version of the book is the best because it has the best stories and things of that nature. So, but I have to tell you, it's one of the most fascinating stories I've ever had the pleasure of being a part of. And I feel honored that I was definitely chosen to do this, because why else would they have been sitting on my couch if they weren't connecting me to Dr. Frank? Because that's what that was all about.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that he was supposed to pass way before he did. And I know that they kept him alive. He had many operations during the time that I knew him. And I knew that they were keeping him alive so that we could have this interaction. And when it was his time to go, it was his time to go, because they did give me a vision of me being a pallbearer at his funeral. And so, I knew that was going to happen. And then he passed in November, I think November 18th, 2008. And so I was going to make a short film. I had cast one of the casting directors on Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow. I had done another movie with one of the producers of Saw. Both of those movies they made short conception films first to show to investors. And that's how those films got funded. So I was going to make one, but when Dr. Frank passed, I decided to just shelve it. And then I think it was 2013, I woke up and Teal talked in my ear and said, "It is time to make a short film. I want you to use this person to do your campaign." I mean, named him by name.
Wow.
I want you to put it up on Kickstarter, and you will raise over $5,000. That's all you'll need to start. We will bring you everything else as time goes by. And so I did exactly that. And I am not kidding you. We were thinking of making it on such a small scale. And then things they wanted it on a big scale. So all of this stuff just kept happening and coming into the door, right? And coming through the door. And I said, one day I remember saying, I would really like a real DP with a red camera. I want a red camera. The next day, a buddy of mine called and said, "Hey, I got a friend who's a DP and he has a red camera and he wants to shoot this for you for free."
Yeah. It was all set up for you.
It was all set up. I mean, everything happened like that all the way through to the end. And I was never going to show it to the public. It really was just a conglomeration of scenes that I sewed together with a little cliffhanger ending. So people would want to know more. Investors would want to know more. But then the Burbank Film Festival found out about it, and they called me and said, "We would really like to see this." And I said, "Well, okay." And so I showed him the film, and this guy really likes sci-fi. And he goes, "Oh yeah, that was good." I said, "Oh no, we're not done yet." I said, "Watch this." Because at the end, I have an interview with Dr. Frank talking about Valiant Thor. Blew his mind that it was a real story. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "I am making you an official selection now." And we literally sold out the Burbank Film Festival in a short period of time, all 275 seats. Right. They even had to put a screening on later that night. And so it was it turned into this huge thing. And Eileen Davidson was just starting on the Beverly Hills Housewives. She played Dina Thor, Val's wife, in the short. And so the housewives were out there. So we were getting all of this press. And I was like, wow, they just want to take this. They want to take this out there. And, I've always been an Ancient Aliens fan, and I've always wanted to be on that show. And anyway, they called me and they said, "We saw your short film. We want you to come on our show. We want to do a segment on Valiant Thor." And they did it brilliantly. It was so brilliantly done and executed. And we even had Paul Hellyer was on there, and he confirmed the Valiant Thor story. He confirmed it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You know what? I can't believe this, but we are out of time.
Oh my God. Thank you guys for listening to all this fun stuff.
Thank you so much, Craig. Would you tell everybody how they can get a hold of the movie and all of your books?
Yes. You can watch Stranger at the Pentagon, or you can buy all of Dr. Frank's books like Stranger at the Pentagon, UFO Conspiracy, Outwitting Tomorrow, which is hugely popular, and Millennium 7. We even have Valiant Thor t-shirts because people begged me to do it. So I hired a comic book guy to do the thing. So all of that is at strangeratthepentagon.com. And you just click on buy book and DVD, and everything right there is for sale. And if you buy things in bulk, you get them cheaper. You can buy the ET Almanac at autobiography of ANET.com. Click on other books. And by the way, all these things, even Dr. Frank's, if you ask me, I will be happy to personalize and autograph them for you. And on the homepage of Autobiography of an ET is where you can get the Autobiography of an Extraterrestrial Saga book series, the 4 books. And you can buy them individually, or you can click a button. And that's all. Those are all some of the movies I've cast over the years. 40 years in casting. That's how long I've been doing it. So, so Autobiography of an ET, or you can click a button there and buy all 4 books on hardcover or softcover. So, well, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the UNX News Podcast with Margie K. Any rebroadcast or duplication of this program or its content without express written permission from Margie K. is strictly prohibited. The UNX News Podcast, in direct cooperation with the internet website, margiek.com.